Welcome to Forestry Now, where we explore the forces impacting profitable and sustainable management of commercial forests and natural woodlands. I'm Dermot McNally. This is the second part of my interview with John Sherlock, a forest owner who runs a firewood, sawmilling and bespoke timber manufacturing business called Sherlock's Firewood and Craft Timber. In the first interview, we discussed his own forest outside Navan in County Meath and the work of the North East Forestry Group. In this episode, we talk about John's firewood, sawmilling and bespoke manufacturing business. We also talk briefly about efforts to bring sawmillers across Ireland together. As always, links to what we discuss as well as contact details are available in the show notes below. Feel free to email me with feedback or suggestions at forestrynowpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, enjoy the conversation. John, big question now. How's the firewood business going?
Well, the firewood business is busy at the minute. Our firewood business has evolved. Every year we work on it. No business, Dermot, as you know, can stand still. So you have to stay working at it. And every year we try and do a little bit of something. This year in particular, we've spent a good bit of time on developing online sales, and that has showed. The new legislation of firewood, the EPA requirement that you have to have a quality cert, you have to produce and dry firewood, that I think will come into play. It will help the firewood industry. Now, our aim within the WFQA and as a firewood producer, none of us want to be the king of firewood producers and take over all the firewood producing in Ireland. Ireland is not structured like that. Ireland is a country full of individuals doing individual small businesses, and we're small farms, family businesses, and most firewood businesses that's what we are. So we're the same. But what we're saying is, unless we ensure that the quality of the firewood, i.e. that it's dry, clean, well presented, and that it's not hooky timber or anything like that, that it has to be dry. Unless it's done, the problem with air quality will continue. And the only way then that will be rectified will be if people talk about banning stoves. So that then again will have a poor for forest owners, because if you remember back to prior to before people started installing wood stoves, pulpwood was on the floor. You couldn't give it away, and it was costing you money to get tinned. Now at least there's some money coming out of it when you're getting tinned. So we need to make sure that we're producing quality firewood.
If I remember right, John, one of the things that happened was you were thinning your own forest around the time that you set the firewood business up. And maybe you tell me what kind of investment you made, the machinery you had to buy, because that was a new business for you at that stage.
It's a funny one, Dermot. I do tell people this story. We were here and we have a warehouse business, a small warehouse business going, and I'd have staff here, and there wouldn't be, if you can imagine, when the trucks are in, they're in, and when they're not. So I was looking for a standard product that I could make that wouldn't go out of date for the boys to do. And by Jesus, I couldn't find any products that I looked hard and fast. And one day I got an email in here into the office from Noel Gavigan in the Bioenergy Association, the Woodfield Quality Association. And he said, we're holding an event in Kenny McGawley's firewood business in Mohill, and you're invited. And because our forest was coming up to first thin, I was sitting in the office. It was a Portakabin at the time, and I said to my wife Evelyn, who's the real boss in the business, I'm going off to Mohill for the day to look at firewood. And she was right. And I went down to Mohill and I looked at Kenny's business, and I thought, well, you know what? I could probably do that within our premises. And then the second heart for the day was, at the time, was Leader from Leitrim. We had a chat with them and they showed. So I came home and I said to my wife, I'm going to be starting doing firewood. And she says, with what? Well, I'm going to talk to Leader. So we did an application through Leader. We got funding, and we're very lucky and we're very grateful at the time. And that enabled us to buy the equipment. We went off on a study tour with the WFQA. I remember there was 21 of us went, and we're all still friends. And I learned more from them lads because of us. Some of them, again, like the forestry, some of them were well ahead of us. And there was a few of us who, just like me, hadn't even a firewood processor in the yard. And they were saying, "Are you producing much firewood?" This is none. And, but from that, it kick-started the firewood business. So we bought pulp and we started that summer. We produced for that winter. And I think we probably came in on the golden years of firewood. My wife had done website design in a previous job, so she did a small website, and we just put the website up and we started selling. And every year we've achieved growth every year since that. But every year we seem to invest in our business. So we do have this conversation within the WFQA of when are we going to see the real money? Because we're investing in our business every year, because obviously if you're producing more firewood, you need more space, you need more drying facilities, etc.
Yeah, constant reinvestment is a necessary evil if you want to keep going. John, then, so the initial setup, would that have been expensive in today's terms? What are you talking about there? I mean, you had the warehouse, you had the sheds, but I presume you didn't have the polytunnels that were set up for drying.
So initially we bought the machines and stock. The machines at the time, I think, was about 60,000, and we got a grant from Leader for that, for part funding. We were lucky in that we had a forklift here. So they were the two crucial things. So we were able to get the timber dumped in the yard and we had the forklift. The first couple of years we were only cutting in the summer and we were putting it into the sheds dry. And we decided then, because obviously demand outstripped supply, I was just saying that for the first 3 years I was telling people in February, I have no dry timber. And they were looking in a yard full of timber. And they said, "You have timber?" And I said, "Yeah, but it's not dry." It takes a good bit of determination to turn down money in a yard in the middle of February, to tell a customer. I mean, you have stuff sitting 10 foot away from you, tell them, and not selling it, because so it takes a little bit of pig-headedness to do that. So then we looked. So then we built a polytunnel. I was very lucky. There's a neighbour of ours puts them up, and he actually was looking for somewhere to have put a display. So I said, "Well, you can put a big display in my yard." So we came to an arrangement, and he had done it for a couple of other firewood producers. So I actually went and looked at theirs. That's the other thing about in our group. We've all been in each other's premises. Now you think that'd be a thing you wouldn't do. But we've all done it. We actually, some of us intertrade. Some of us, we buy kindling from each other, and we've actually formed now. There's a group of us, and we buy all our bags together. So we buy a container a year of bags together, and we get a discount on that. But that's how we worked. So we went into polytunnels. Polytunnels weren't that dear at the time. They were about 12 or 14,000. And then as time went on, we got a log grab to grab the logs, and then we bought a small teleporter and put the log grab on it. And we had a small little lorry that we were using for our gate business and our warehouse business, a little 7.5 tonner. So we're using it. So as time went on, we bought another machine, and we bought improved our delivery system, and it's a case of committing to what you're doing and deciding that you're going to do it right.
And John, how did it merge in with the warehousing business then? Did you find that it balanced out the peaks and troughs? Or have you reached the point now where the firewood is full-time for certain members of staff?
Well, the way we work it is, initially it was only it works with the warehouse. It really does, because you're cutting timber on a machine and a lorry comes in. And we have 2 full-time members of staff here, along with my wife and myself. So if a container comes in that's on pallets, one of the guys stops doing what he's doing, turns off the machine, and runs over and unloads the machine, puts it in. Sometimes it could be a container where the bags have to be palletized, so that'll be a morning's work committed for the buys. But because it's firewood, so you're not gluing, you're not, as you know, Dermot, you're not in the middle of spraying a unit, or you're not in the middle of a process where you can stop. So you literally can turn off the machine and go and do. And I was only looking at there, we do a monthly financials every month here at the end of every month of where we're going. and firewood now is 50% of our turnover. So the warehousing is just part of the business now. So it's interesting thing to find. It is a high volume, low margin business. So you have to batter it through, and you have to sell it. And that's the other thing we do within our buy-in group. We do sometimes sit down, and we did it last year. We do it sort of every year in the spring when the firewood business is over. A group of us sit down, maybe 3 or 4 of us sit down together, and we have a chat. And last year I says, can we spend a day or a while looking at our costs? So what it costs to produce, and it's very interesting, again, from a business point of view, because you would have an idea, it costs so much to cut that and put it in a drum, and it costs so much. And then somebody else says, well, mine is such and such. And then you see, you've actually 4 lads looking at your business and discussing your costs with you. And if you've been a little bit optimistic, they're telling you. So by being able to speak freely within a group is a fantastic thing, you know what I mean? And the other thing which has evolved is people now who are buying timber, the general public, they buy a pallet of timber off us, which is like a drum. It's 1.7 cubic meters. As the years have went on, people have become more educated about dry timber. When they ring it, they ask, is it dry? And we'd say, well, it's certified dry, and we weigh every pallet before we take it out. We do moisture testing. So the general public have become more conscious of quality too. Now, obviously, there is people who buy on price, and there's always going to be people who buy on price, and that's just the way life is. But a lot of people buy on quality too, and we would try and be up there with our quality in that every year we try and do something that'll just improve. We put in a couple of years ago, we put in a log cleaner, so when the logs come off the processor, it bops them along, and even stuff we were talking about last night about at the Firewood meeting last night, I was saying something I noticed, that if you start taking the logs out of a stack on the southern side of the stack, and mostly we'll be doing this during the summer, the wind and the air gets at the logs that's exposed going along. Now, it probably won't dry the logs, but it dries a lot of the detritus that'll be attached to the logs. So you have a bit of clay, or you have a bit of bark, loose bark. So when that goes through the processor and it hits the cleaner, it just falls off a lot quicker than when it's damp and it's glued. So all these little things, you know what I mean? But that doesn't happen unless you think about it. Unless you sit down and start thinking about it. It's like every other business. You have to think about what you're doing and how you can improve it.
And John, the business has obviously expanded then from the start. So how much area of warehousing do you need now to store the dried and chopped and bagged product? And how many polytunnels? And I know you have a big yard that's full of pulp that's just sitting waiting and is going through an air dry process.
That's the thing, Dermot. Every year you need more space. The more you sell, the more space you need. And we're discussing that last night again. Because if you can imagine, you need at least, if you think about it, you need a minimum of a year's supply of timber in front of you. So if you think about it, when you come to, say, the 1st of September, you have all of next year's firewood cut and ready for sale, and you have all of the following year's timber in stacks. So you're looking at 2 years' timber sitting around a yard. So we have 3 polytunnels that hold 750 pallets. We have a shed that we put the small bags that we build on pallets during the summer, and it'll hold 450 pallets of small bags. We also then have an area where when we cut our cubes, we stack them and we put a row of old curtains off trucks, and they do the secondary dyeing process. So if you can, and then we have all the stacks, and we utilize part of a forest road over the road for more logs.
Wow.
So it goes through a process where you dry it primarily to get it down to about 30%. Then you put it in you cut it into the pallets, and then it dries further, and then we finish it off in the polytunnels. When we start taking stuff out of the polytunnels, we do it on a rotational basis. So you actually get 2 runs through your polytunnel per season. You spend your time buying stone and pushing out clay. That's what you spend your time. But then it comes to the stage where where you decide where your infrastructure can do what it can do. So if you can imagine, we have 2 full-time here and we take on part-time in the summer. So it gets to the stage where one truck, which we have, and we've a pickup, there's a certain volume at which they can deliver. And if you decide then, well, I'm going to go for extra staff, well, then you have to go massively bigger on turnover. You have to expand your infrastructure. So I think there is a critical level at which I've probably hit it here, that we do about 3,000 tonne a year, maybe a little bit more. And that would be our critical limit. Do you know
that's your sweet spot, really?
That's a sweet spot.
Optimize the assets you have and optimize your turnover without starting to cause bottlenecks at one point. Here's a layman's question, because I know a little bit about what you're talking about, but not enough. Is there a way that you can fast forward the process by kiln drying, or is it just too expensive to kiln dry timber that's going to end up in a fire?
There's a number of people who are using kilns to dry the timber, but they wouldn't be using it to dry it from, say, fresh down. So they'd be able to, they still would be stacking it to get it down to a reasonable level, and then they'd be accelerating the process by putting it in a forced air heated kiln. The energy use there is very, very sore. It's very sore. So, and it's an infrastructural cost. So our thoughts are, you'd be better off buying more timber, having it in stock, covering it, than an actual forced kiln. It depends on your market. The people I'd be talking about would be doing maybe 20,000, 30,000 tonnes a year. They'd be doing a lot of the small bags for the multiples. They'd be working on a lot smaller margins. We only do about 20% of our firewood production is for wholesale uses for shops. The other 80% we sell direct to the end user.
And John, we were talking earlier about we don't want, as forest owners, to grow hardwood for firewood, because it's effectively one of the lower value outputs.
Yeah.
But even within the firewood, then you must end up with a lot of bark and a lot of sawdust that you have to process and get rid of. What happens to all that material?
The sawdust, we sell it for horse bedding, and the bark then that comes off, so we shred all the bark, and then we sell that as bark mulch for weed control throughout the year. Believe it or not, there's people still buying bark off us. So it means that every single bit of stuff that comes into the yard goes back out. Now, people say, you're selling everything. You're only selling it back out of cost. You're selling it to get rid of it. Do you know?
Yeah. We just moved back there to your customer breakdown then. So you've got a breakdown between business and public. But within the businesses that are buying, are most of them resellers, or have you got many, the likes of the saunas or the hotels that keep a kind of a fire going, or a bar? Well, what way does all that break down?
Yeah, when you go down, when you take away from the small bags, which would be on like the side of the filling station, we supply them to shops and fuel suppliers. We then, the larger, what we'd sell to the public, we also sell to saunas. That's a growing market. Our biggest customer is a sauna, a local sauna user here.
Wow, okay.
And he's taking 4 pallets every week, all year. It's another string to our bow, is we sell to saunas. Sauna users, they definitely know the difference between good and dry firewood, because they're burning it every single day. So they want it. They don't want it, like the public coming in, and they want heat from what they're buying, you know what I mean?
We've talked about the WFQA, the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance, a group that you're involved in. But if I'm a timber firewood producer, how do I get that certification, and what will it guarantee the people that are buying my firewood?
The WFQA in an essence is an assurance that if you see our label, the WFQA label, and the supplier name on it, that timber is certified to be under a certain moisture, and it's written on it what moisture content it's under. So basically, if you wanted to join the WFQA, there's a coordinator there, Noel Gavigan. You contact him, you tell him what way you do it. He comes out and he does a site visit. He looks at what you do. Basically, he looks at what you do, and if you're doing the job right, and he thinks you can get the timber for a year's supply. Under that, he then goes through the process of getting you certified, which is not an onerous process. That you have to be able to do ongoing moisture tests, and you have to document them. You have to have insurance. Along with ensuring quality, it's ensuring that what you're at is right. We have an auditor in here every year. So every year the auditor comes and he will inspect your records for your moisture testing. He'll inspect your premises to see are you doing what you said you were doing. I think it's all about a system. That you have a system in your head and your business of producing stuff that's right. You have to be willing to sometimes change what you're doing and be capable of producing quality timber.
We'll get back to the conversation with John Sherlock in a second. But if you're buying or selling forestry, go to forestsales.ie. That's where you'll find forests and farmland for sale across the country and all the information you need to make a decision. That's forestsales.ie. Now, back to the interview with John. There must be a big synergy between running the firewood business and then expanding into sawmilling.
In a way, there is. How we ended up doing the sawmilling was because I come from a joinery wood turning background, and I've always sort of had a graw for timber, as they say. We were looking at some of the timber. Some of the timber we purchased comes from different entities, and those timber coming in here, and I was looking at it saying, actually, that's way too good to be cutting into firewood. Something we were talking about earlier, Dermot, in that we grow timber for planks, not for firewood. And I was looking at this. So I looked at investing in a sawmill and stuff like that. And again, you're making a leap of faith. And I just didn't want to commit too much capital to a project that I was unsure of. So I bought an entry-level sawmill and started sawmilling. And believe it or not, I had that sawmill for about 5 years, and we worked it. Man, we worked it. When you start sawmilling, you think everything you cut is gold. And it's only after a while you discover a lot of it is lead, So I have found as time goes on, now I can look at something and say, well, that'll come into something that's worthwhile. So what we did was we started sawmilling timber that wasn't of use, that would be too good for firewood. We stacked it, we put it somewhere to dry, and we were tipping along. And next thing, COVID happened. And then a fella came into me one day. He was putting up a shebeen. You remember all these little drinking dens we had?
Yeah.
And he was making a shebeen, and he wanted to put a countertop. And I had 2-inch beech there. And he bought the 2-inch beech off me, and he bought a bit of inch beech off me and a bit of inch planks to make up his bar. And of course, he went and invited all his friends round. So then, what happened? His friends decided they wanted a bar. So there was lads coming in here buying timber off me here during COVID. I never had as good a COVID. It's not a nice thing to say. They nearly emptied me of timber for making these shebeens. And that sort of gave me an idea that there is people out there to buy stuff like this. Then I also, at the same time, I wanted to do a timber structure. And post and beam buildings that were originally done in the UK and in America at the very start, when the pioneers were there. And I wanted to do a course, and I couldn't do a course using softwoods. I couldn't find anyone that was doing it using softwoods, because they all do it using oak. I thought, I'm not going to be able to get Irish oak for a while. So I found a guy in Scotland who does it with softwoods. He does it with Douglas Fir. So I went over and I did a training day with him. I did a training course with him. And that opened my eyes up. And I came back and I started doing post and beam work. So that led me to doing more beams. And then I bought a couple of load of Irish Douglas Fir, and now we're cutting beams and cladding. And then we looked at the saw we had. And because I pay staff here to do work, I couldn't make and get enough output out of the saw I was using it'd be all right if I was working it myself. So I looked at buying a bigger saw. So we bought a more production orientated sawmill in Poland, and I actually bought it without seeing it during COVID. The Scottish man was buying one, and the two of us bought one together. Obviously, it's far quicker. You're able to get stuff out. You're able to get stuff out quicker and more accurate. So It has developed into another aspect. So we spent a couple of years building up stock. So if you can imagine, you saw a 2-inch plank of beech, well, you're going to have to stack it and sticker it and look at it for 2 years before you get it. So we also made, recently we made a small kiln for drying planks. Because again, I don't want to stick too much money into it. I want to see how it works. It's working all right. It's slow, but it's good enough. But we're now at the stage where we're starting to sell our timber because it is starting to come out the other end, if you know what I mean. The large volume of timber that we've been sawing into stock is coming out the far end. But along with that, we have our Douglas Fir business where we sell the beams and stuff like that, and that's sold as a green timber because it's an outside. So it's a bit like a whiskey manufacturer. A lot of them when they start doing whiskey, they start with gin because they can have more of a cash flow from gin immediate. So that's the way I'd look at my sawmilling business. So we're actually doing quite a lot of post and beam bespoke projects. So give you an idea, we were doing a project there for a guy in Dublin. He's doing a pavilion at the side of his house. He's putting a glass roof on it. So we did that there recently. We did a job for a distillery in Drogheda where they were putting a row of barrels, big oak barrels, and they were stacking them 3 row high, and they wanted, like, if you can imagine a railway line, that's what we made, only it was a bit narrower with an angle to fit the barrels. It was 80 foot long, so we made it up out of a series of pieces joined together. We also did the cladding on that. We actually did some bespoke fencing for them. It could be anything for anybody. We're not a sawmill for the 4x2s, the 6x2s, because that's not our aim. We generally cut for people. Somebody can come in and say, can I have this, for a building? I can say, yeah, well, we have timber in stock. We can resaw it or do that. And we have a big 4-cutter machine which will play in the 4 sides at the one time.
John, what's your maximum length and width then? I did see the 4-cutter online there. I was looking at it. It's a fine machine, Yeah,
we've done 21-foot beams through that. We've done 21-foot oak beam through that. I had it, I can't actually remember where I came across. It was a big tree and I had cut into a beam and a guy was looking for it and he wanted it planed and we put it through it now. And I went through it fairly slow. But the beauty about that 4-cutter is you can also put, if you can imagine when you're converting a tree from a round to a square, you're going to have these segments like oranges. What we tend to do is cut inch planks out of them and we use them for cladding. So we run them out through a 4-cutter into TNG and whatever people want. And that, like, from bringing a very low value product in, when you get it into TNG and the like of that, you're into a very, very, very high value product. Right, you're doing a bit of grading and you have a bit of loss along the way, but you are converting it into something of high value. And the timber is local. And I can say, I know where that Douglas Fir come from. I came from a continuously managed forest in Wicklow. I know where the beech came from. I came from an estate somewhere. I know where that oak came from. It's a lovely thing to see something that came in as a tree going back out as a plank to a building or somewhere within 10 or 15 mile. And that's what used to happen, Dermot. There is going to be this availability of timber. And it's coming, and it's coming quicker than people think. Jonathan Spatsy there in Teagasc, he's doing research on how much quicker Irish oak is growing than the continental, and he has an amazing statistics. So we're going to be into quality, into timber. And as I said earlier there to you, like some of the timber that might come out of the oak, some of that hardwood could be used as beam timber. It doesn't all have to be barrel oak. So when you can start at the bottom and work up.
Yeah. So John, for myself that has a bit of oak growing, coming up on 30 years old now, are you going to be in a position to buy lengths of firewood or lengths of oak off me to process them and then sell on to your customers? Is that what you hope to be doing?
That's what I hope to be doing. And the one thing is, I think at the minute, most of the hardwoods that we're doing are what I'd call rescue timber. So they're timber that would come out of an estate or a tree that has to be knocked. Now, the quality can be fairly, as you can imagine, it can be ropey. And that sort of timber is always going to be used for bespoke products. The timber you're talking about, Dermot, it will have been managed in a commercial plantation. So by its very nature, it'll be straight. Now, it won't be of large enough diameter to plank yet, but it will be of large enough diameter to put into beams. So what I'd be saying to the forest owners, there's probably a sweet spot there of about 25 centimeters, or depending on the sapwood, depending on what you're going to do with the beam. If it's an interior beam, I wouldn't be that hugely worried about sapwood. But what I'd be saying is that's going to be your first port of call, is beam timber. And so you can go down as far as so for our average beam, our average post and beam structure would be 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters. And there's loads of demand for that. But the one thing I'd be saying to forest owners is, if you have a tree like that, and if you look at it, will you say to yourself, well, if it's coming out because there's a better tree than beside it, well, there's nothing wrong with, if it's a second tree, there's nothing wrong with spending a bit of time, when it's younger, shaping it either. And the other thing too is, let's not cut it and then try and sell it. Let's try and sell it before we cut it. And there is a demand for local product, and I think that's something we need to do, is to link up between people, the growers, the sawmillers, and the end users.
Let me pause the interview to ask you this. Could your business benefit from increased profile in the forestry sector? If so, maybe you should advertise in Ireland's only dedicated forestry podcast, with new episodes coming out every 2 weeks. So get in touch with Forestry Now to see how we can make it work for you. Back to the chat with John. John, you mentioned there Douglas Fir a few times. Where are you sourcing that, and are you paying much of a premium on a typical Sitka spruce saw log?
I'm buying that mostly in Wicklow, because there's a guy there that has it. I do also buy it in other sales that come up. You're paying at about almost double what you'd be paying for Sitka for a quality tree now, you know what I mean? I think Douglas Fir is a fantastic timber, an underrated timber. It's for any uses, it doesn't move when it's drying. It's relatively stable.
So, John, when you're buying your Douglas Fir, are you trying to get a lorry load at a time, or how's your?
I'd buy an Arctic load at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. The lorry load of Douglas Fir arrives in your yard.
Yeah.
Just talk me through how that gets and how long it takes to get it from the lorry to a product that's going out that you're selling and turning into money.
Generally, what we do, we'd have a load ahead of us in our Douglas Fir. So we could have Douglas Fir sitting there 3 months, in a stack. So what we do is, at the moment, what we do is we generally then cut it into what we would call cants. So we cut it into the largest square size we could get it into. Unless there's a particular demand for a product, for a post and beam that they wanted immediately, we still cut it wet because we sell it green, and that's the way it is. But generally, what we do is cut it into cants at a certain stage. That, if it's going to start going off, if it's going to start decay, well, then we have to cut it into cants, and we square it off into cants. We put the rest into inch planks for tongue and groove boards, and we'd sticker them. We'd always have a supply of probably an Arctic load of these cants, as we call them, in various sizes. So they'd sit there. The inch planks would be drying. So then a customer comes in and he would say, I want X, Y, or Z. Well, we'd look straight immediately to our cants to see what's the nearest one to them we can get. And then if we don't get close enough to it that we've to mill a bit off, we'll mill off a 25, we'll mill off an inch plank, because we can still use it as a conversion into a board. Then they might want it planed. So then at that stage, then we bring it in and plane it, run it through the big fork cutter. With everything they want, there's obviously an additional cost. Some people see a post and beam building and want to do it, and they might initially say, well, John, will you do it? And I'll say, yeah. And then they'll see the price, because it's mostly handwork. And then they'll revert back to, they'll do a lot of the donkey work. If I can produce the beam with them planed and squared and ready, and the other products, then they'll go off and make it themselves. And that's the way we work with the Douglas. Then you see we have all these inch planks, and we leave the ones that have the bark on with the veiny edge, as they call it. We leave them, we don't cut them until we need them. Because what we found in the past is sometimes you get jobs where people want the veiny edge. There was a guy came in he was doing up a pub in Dublin and they wanted to do the whole interior with veiny edge. So what we did was, he still wanted the plain finish. We just ran it through the planer and planed the top side that was shown, and he wanted. So I don't really convert it into plank because we do have a good bit of percentage of actual inch boards with a sawn edge that we can run straight through, but we tend to keep the others. So you try and get the conversion rate. So most people work on a fact that if you buy timber, that if you buy a cubic meter of round timber, that when you have it sawn, you're going to get a half a cubic meter. So you lose 50% in your conversion process.
So the beam goes out green, which means that you haven't done any kiln drying on it. Is that right, John? Whereas the tongued and grooved all has to go through your kiln.
No, it'd be the tongue and grooved, and that would still be going out as air dried, but it would be for, what would you say? It wouldn't be for internal uses. It would still be. It'd be outside cladding or an outside structure with cladding inside it. So, for example, if you did a post and beam, we'd supply you with the post and beam for all the lats that you'd put on top under the slates or under whatever covering you're getting. You know, so it'd be perfect for the like of that. So there is a use for it within the. So if you think you put up a tongue and post and beam building, if you're going to tongue and groove or even plank that for the roof, you're going to need a lot of planks, but you want to do it in the same timber, because you don't look up and see, and you'd know a timber that's different. You'd know that anyone else would know it looking at it. So that's what we do. They can buy the whole structure then for stuff like that, and for that matter, then people come in and they might want to make gates or they might want to make doors for a cottage. Well, I might throw some of that into the kiln and dry it, you know. But it depends on the timber and depends on the look.
Okay, so John, I wanted to ask you about the new guild of sawmillers that you're involved in.
So basically, a number of years ago, the Limerick Tipperary group had a project called Hardwood Focus, which was to try and see could there be a developing market for small diameter hardwood. And I accidentally joined that. Well, I went on a study tour with them because somebody dropped out, and we ended up in a sawmill in the UK, and it was a hardwood sawmill, and they had a program called Woodland to Workshop, and it just went from bringing forest owners straight through and educating people about timber sawmilling. It was a 3-day course. It was excellent. So we came home from the North East Forestry Group, and I was all excited about this. So we did a mirror image program within the North East Forestry Group, and we got funding from the Department of Agriculture. We were very helpful to us and very supportive. And from that, we had such an interest in it, we decided we'd open it to all the forest owner groups in Ireland to the IFO. So then we did a project with the IFO, and it was called Bringing Value to Hardwoods. So for this, it was more a focused project, in that it was people who had to have a sawmill, or people who were about to purchase a sawmill. So we had 15 participants in it, and we went around various sawmilling entities like ourselves, not large-scale sawmills. It was such an interesting project. We were with wheel makers, we were with boat builders, we were with a member who has his own small-scale sawmill, who refurbished his own castle. We have a guy with a castle, Dermot. He refurbished his own castle with his own
company, John.
Yeah, with his own sawmill from timber from his own forest. And I want to see, it was stunning. And then we ended up with a guy who's made a business out of producing chopping boards. So we had this group of people, very motivated, very interested. And when the project ended, we felt it was again, we had reached a hiatus from, if you could say, a third project. So we decided, let's form some form of a structure. So we looked at all the structures we were thinking of doing, and we decided, well, what we see as a need is education of people who have purchased these small-scale sawmills, So if you can imagine, I was speaking to one sawmill provider who does the majority of these small-scale sawmills in Ireland, and he has sold 170 of them in Ireland. 170. So I would guarantee, Dermot, that at least 60 to 70% of them are forest owners.
Okay.
So we have potentially all these small-scale sawmillers who have the ability to convert timber into something worthwhile. But I would say, and I include myself in it, need further education to maximise what they're doing, that the product that they're sawmilling is suitable for market and is what the market wants. So we looked at this and we said, this is where we want to focus on, is as not that there is existing sawmills of various sizes, but we're talking about is people starting out who are wanting to add value. So we got funding from the department. We actually held an in-house meeting of all the original project people, and we got in a consultant. So we spent a day last week or the week before down in Tullamore going through what we see the needs of people. So we're going to have a report from that in the next 2 weeks, and we're going to move on further. Within the project, we have funding for a website, for some publications, but we're also doing a signature event, which is a post and beam course for 2 weeks for 8 participants. And James Thompson, my original tutor from Scotland, he's doing that. And interesting, he's doing the design he's doing is for a small cabin that he has designed for students who wish to stay overnight when he's doing his post and beam course. Because my thoughts on this is that if we got this design, and this could be used for a cabin in our woods, because as we were talking about earlier with my replanting, I think this is going to be more of a recreational in the short term. So I'm looking at putting a cabin down in the woods there for family use. And so if we had this could be something that forest owners could use as a resource. So this is where we're again, Dermot, we're at the start of a new adventure. But I think if this provides a demand and a skill for people to convert Irish hardwoods primarily and some minor conifers into a saleable item, I think it benefits everybody. Do you know?
Yeah, without a doubt.
And if within that we develop a brand, and I think it's a brand that people, if you can think of initially what everybody's going to produce and what we all will be producing with these type of sawmills will be small scale bespoke runs of particular types of timber. And I think within the upper echelons of furniture manufacturing, design, etc., there is probably a demand for high quality Irish grown timber. And I think if you look at what these people, the raw material is a very small percentage of the cost of the finished goods. A lot of it is labour, time, etc., design, and I am convinced that they would be prepared to pay a small premium to be able to market their product as made from Irish timber with a brand and with an authentic Irish timber. So this is where we're looking at. You know, we're also looking at, there's a huge demand, there's a huge market, I'd say, within Irish schools for Irish grown timber. At the moment, we're supplying all our schools with imported timber. And I think if you think about all them 170, 200 probably, but if you had the half of them supplying schools by some manner or means, let's explore it. Well, them people then are supplying local people, local students, maybe our future timber users with Irish timber. And that ties in with educating school attendees about forestry and the benefits of it.
No, fantastic. It all ties in lovely. Yeah.
It does, you know, and I think, and we're lucky in a way that we have this funding mechanism within the forestry promotions to do the like of this, because for a group of individuals to do that on their own without funding, it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, it's in a very, very small scale and it takes longer to get done. Whereas the funding itself, it's not doing something, it's accelerating the process.
Yeah. And the peer-to-peer learning of that, not only will the 8 of you train up, they'll come back, they'll know each other, and they'll know each other for life, and they'll help to push each other on. So.
And the other thing too, we would hope then that they would be speaking to forest owners to say, we actually can sell this timber if you actually can grow it.
Yeah.
It's all very well saying, well, we won't have the hardwoods for another X amount of years. That doesn't matter. We will have enough to keep us going in some manner or form if we can produce it quality-wise. Like what I was talking to you there earlier about Sawmilling. There's a home for every piece of timber if you just have it in the size and the way that the end user wanted it. So you have your fencing, you have your posts, you have your post and beam, you have your T&G. You work the whole way up in the grades. Do you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Adding value all the way.
Adding value the whole way.
John, listen, thanks very much for joining me. That was fantastic.
No problem, Dermot.
So that wraps up the second part of my interview with John Sherlock, and links to topics discussed are in the show notes below. I hope you enjoyed the conversations. Thanks for listening, and please like, subscribe and share with colleagues.